Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Warrior Stories podcast, where we deep dive into the unique health journeys of everyday people like you and me. Health is so often taken for granted, but it's not the default setting for a lot of us. So that's why we want to empower people to keep fighting, keep searching for answers, and we want people to know that they're not alone. If that resonates with you at all, then go ahead and click that subscribe button so you'll always be the first one to know whenever we have new episodes out. Now, today, I'm really excited for our guest today because they've experienced chronic pain from a lot of different perspectives. So I'm very excited to get to share this with you guys. Our guest today is Viktoria Hamma. She is a chronic pain and weight loss coach, a clinical hypnotherapist, personal trainer, massage therapist, and she has her own business in person and virtually in Muskoka, Ontario, Canada. Whew. That's a resume. When she's not helping clients, she's at the barn horseback riding, watching football with her partner, or getting adventurous outside with her 3 dogs. And I think she's babysitting multiple dogs today, so she's got a full house right now. I'm very excited that she's with us. Not only does she help others manage chronic pain, but she's experienced her own share of it as well. So like I said, she's really seen it from a lot of different angles. Huge warm welcome to Viktoria. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks so much for having me.
I was just pumped whenever we connected because you have experienced chronic pain yourself, and then you kind of made it your vocation to help other people manage it as well. And it looks like from a variety of different ways, which is very exciting. And I think it's really exciting for people who traditional pain management has maybe not worked. So I'm really excited to get to hear your story. Can you tell us a little bit about kind of your journey with chronic pain?
Yeah, for sure. So I, grew up and I had, the occasional pain here and there from sports injuries and this and that. So I was fortunate young. I didn't experience a ton of chronic pain. I did, however, when I became a teenager, I started getting headaches and migraines. They were so bad that, I started seeing a neurologist. And of course, it was that fun game of try this medication, then try this medication, then try this medication.
Oh, yeah.
Some of them you had to remember to take every day at a certain time. And it was a lot, especially, if anybody has teenagers, they know how hard it is to get them to do something on schedule every single day. So it came a point in that part, I realized I don't want to keep taking medication because A, we weren't having amazing results.
Oh, gotcha.
And B, it was always, well, it kind of works, but not always. And then what other side effects does it have? How long am I going to be on it? And then sometimes for some people, it's the cost of the medication themselves.
Oh gosh, absolutely.
So yeah, it was one of those things I knew that wasn't what I wanted. I had a really fabulous neurologist, so I'm really lucky. And I said to him, I don't want to be on medication. Are there other alternatives? He actually worked one day a month or something like that with a doctor that specializes in the physical. I can't remember what specialty he was because it was years ago now, but they actually sat down together and did a consult with me, all 3 of us in a room together.
Oh, that's
which
phenomenal.
I think it's amazing, right? You never get that. So when they kind of heard my, story and everything else, they decided, well, you know what? It could be coming from a muscle kind of origin. So why don't you try physiotherapy specific to somebody who's going to help you with headaches and migraines? If you can find somebody who does that, and let's try that route. And then let's, come back together and see how we're doing. So I was fortunate enough to meet an amazing physiotherapist, and the work they did a lot of hands-on work, which now with my career as a massage therapist, I recognize is similar to what we do in massage therapy. So it was really helpful. And I found it didn't cure my migraines and headaches, but it really reduced my symptoms enough that it was way more manageable. And if anybody who has chronic pain recognizes that sometimes all you need is to reduce it enough that you can get back to some of those everyday life activities. So it was amazing. Then moving forward, I actually herniated a disc in my back.
Oh no.
I was playing lots of volleyball and, I think it was just the twisting and snapping motion. That being said, I'd always had a tiny bit of low back pain. I attributed it to horseback riding because that can be tough on your low back. When that happened, I went to the hospital because I'd never felt pain like that before. And I'd injured myself in sports, but I'd never felt that kind of pain. So I went to the hospital. I had to get my parents up to drive me because I was in so much pain. I wasn't moving and I was crying. And of course they were like, oh, it's back pain. Just take an Advil. You'll be fine. And I was like, no, guys,
Back
like
pain can
something
be
else
so
is happening.
serious.
Yeah. I'm not crying because I'm in back pain. I'm crying because something else is happening. So, went to the hospital, sat forever because it's not really an emergency. Finally got in to see somebody. They looked at my age, looked at me, asked, do you play sports? I said, yep. And they're like, well, it's just sports related.
I was going to say, I can feel the dismissal coming a mile away.
They gave me some painkillers. See you later.
Mm.
And luckily, again, I had that physiotherapist. So I called them and they got me in that day. And I was able to get a little bit of relief enough that I was moving better. And then, of course, creating a plan, it helped me. But that initial issue, I realize now stuck with me for a long time. Now I'm at the point I can happily say I really am chronic pain free.
That's fantastic.
So I know there is hope. That's the overlying message here.
Well, I think one of the things that I really like about your story, and it's so funny to say, like, I like this about your chronic pain story, but like, this is the world that we live in, and this is what this podcast is. You were very physically active. You were doing all these sports, you were doing all these things, and doctors looked at you when you were younger, and they were like, oh, this is just a sports injury. You're healthy in every other regard. We don't really need to worry about this. But injuries can happen to anyone, regardless of how active you are. And I think a lot of people who are like, no, I'm really active, I don't have to worry about chronic pain. I don't have to worry about injuries.
Mm-hmm.
And it really can happen to anyone. And I feel like the more that we kind of, I don't necessarily want to say like gaslight, but like that definitely does happen. But the more we just push aside like, oh, it's just a sports injury, like it's just, an issue from your lifestyle or something like that, it's not that big of a deal. It is a big deal, and it can turn into a big deal, and it can be emotionally, it can manifest in so many different ways. So I feel like your story in particular is important, not just for people who have like chronic illnesses or diseases or anything like that. It's important for just everyone, because this stuff can happen to anyone.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, so then I totally forgot I had one more major chronic pain issue later on.
Once you have so many, they just pile up and you just kind of forget after a while.
Yeah. Well, I think everybody knows if you've experienced chronic pain, you're like, oh yeah, and then I did break my foot.
Yeah.
And then, oh yeah, I did do this. And so, and I mean, I get it all the time as a massage therapist. We have our form you're supposed to fill out, and there's a spot for injuries and pain. And like oftentimes people fill out nothing. And then they get on the table and I'm like, oh, okay, so did you hurt this shoulder in the past? And they're like, oh yeah, I dislocated it like 7 times. It kind of pops in and out now. I'm like,
that's a big deal.
Okay. I mean, that's technically part of your health history, so feel free to write that down next time. But we definitely downplay sometimes the things that happen to us because our memories like that, right? We think about the things that were most significant, and then the other stuff that happens, we're like, oh, right, I guess that kind of does connect. So for me, I mean, I also had a foot thing that happened, and I forgot about it because it was actually very impactful at the time. I don't know exactly what it was. I had numerous health providers look at it. I had x-rays. I did all this stuff. Nobody could have a real good definitive thing of what it was. Some people thought it was plantar fasciitis. Some thought it was the interosseous membrane between the two bones. Some thought it was a bone spur. Some thought it was arthritis. Like,
just throwing a bunch of answers at you that weren't really answers.
Yeah, exactly. And it was 7 years.
Oh, gosh.
Which is funny that I don't really think about it.
But you kind of need your feet. So 7 years with a foot problem, pretty big deal.
Yeah. And it was, I think it was the hardest injury I had chronically that affected me mentally because it got so bad. My foot was swollen. I could barely walk. I had to consider quitting my job, which is always really challenging because I think that's also admitting it's another level of pain that you can't cope with. It's kind of admitting you're not able to cope with it anymore, or at least it was for me. And then again, through a bunch of different ways and educating myself, which turned into educating others, I actually don't really have foot pain anymore.
Man, I one, that's phenomenal. Like, congratulations, that's amazing. But also just like one of the things that you touched on that I think a lot of people really downplay is the mental fatigue and the psychological impact of dealing with chronic pain, and especially when you don't know why you have chronic pain. I think that's really scary. And it probably has a lot to do with the way that we just kind of forget or block out some of the injuries or illnesses or stuff that happened to us, because our brains are like, we don't even know why that happened. That's terrifying. Will it come back? Is it going to happen again? And so your brain is just like, we're just going to push that to the back for a little bit. So just we can live our lives and not be terrified all the time. And I feel like that's something that a lot of people don't realize is happening to them when it comes to chronic pain, like that compartmentalization.
Well, and it's interesting because now with the work I do, the reason obviously I kind of went into chronic pain and weight loss coaching is because A, so many people are struggling, but B, because I experienced it enough. And now that I've educated myself, I'm able to realize some of the roadblocks people come up against. And a big piece of it is mental. And it is that thought of like, you get to a point in your chronic illness or your chronic pain that you kind of give up in a sense. You really don't believe that you're ever going to get better. And the problem is, if you really believe you're never going to get better,
And you don't.
then you're never going to get better, right? Like it's the catch-22. But it comes from a place of struggle. Like it comes from a place of experiencing it for so long that that does become your new normal, and you can't even envision what your life could look like without it.
Oh, you couldn't have segued more beautifully than you just did. Because I have so many questions about your professional life working with chronic pain. Because you do several different things that that I think a lot of people initially go to a doctor. They're like, I'm going to go get medicine. I'm going to go and have surgery. And you do massage therapy. You do hypnotherapy. And I'm fascinated by all these different, and I hesitate to say alternative because I don't feel like they're alternative methods, at least not to me. But I'm the one that researches all this stuff for fun. So I'm just like, no, this is just normal to me. So can you talk to me a little bit about maybe, I don't even know where to start. Where would you like to start in regard to your professional life with chronic pain?
Yeah. So what's funny is the chronic pain coaching piece actually grew out of me doing these things a little bit more individually and recognizing that I can combine them to create a more powerful alternative resources for clients struggling more specifically with chronic pain or weight loss. And I put chronic pain and weight loss together because I'm sure a lot of us have experienced, well, our doctors love to say, just lose weight.
Oh, yeah.
That's what I love when they say to people.
Even with stuff, with stuff that has nothing to do with like weight, they're like, yeah, I bet if you lost weight that your broken foot would fix itself. And you're just like, oh, okay, cool.
Yeah. Thanks for that great wisdom. But the reality is, because we get limited by our chronic pain, we start to gain weight and we start to lose the ability to do the activities we want to do. And sometimes that does mean we want to lose weight as well. It may not for everybody, but I do find that there's a lot of people that they are kind of coinciding.
I mean, that makes sense.
Which is also, yeah. And it's what kind of adds to that mental fatigue piece as well, because you have people constantly telling you, just lose weight. But you're like, how am I supposed to lose weight if I can't walk? So, it is that I find that they are very interlinked. But the biggest thing, it's funny, I learned in every individual course and everything I take, they always go back to what's called the biopsychosocial model of pain.
What a word.
I know, right? So actually, it's a lot easier than it sounds. Okay. Biological, psychological, social.
Oh,
they call it biopsychosocial. I know. It's once you break it down, you're like, oh, I got this. Okay. But they call it that because they recognize that the experience of pain in our body is affected by all three, not just one. And this is something that I have chronic pain patients, when they first come to me, this is the biggest hurdle we have to learn to get over. Because you've been dismissed for so long, it is really hard to want to accept that your pain is partly contributed by your psychological and your social experiences. When I talk about this, I want to preface it by saying your pain is real. Your pain exists. It is intense. It is limiting. That being said, it is not just biological. It is not just system. It is not just tissue.
If anybody is just listening and not watching this, I'm like applauding. I'm snapping. I'm just like, yes, this is the stuff, people. This is the good stuff. I never put that together, but like as you're saying it, I'm like, absolutely, this makes perfect sense.
Mm-hmm. Well, and this is just it is. So what I find and what I try to explain to patients is if you only ever go the route of trying to find out the tissue damage, the system injury, the whatever it might look like, the biological factors, then potentially you're only ever going to get 33% reduction in pain.
Oh, wow.
At most.
Wow.
Right? If there's 3 pieces, the most you could ever get is potentially 33%. And again, this is chronic pain, not acute pain. There's a difference. We know that.
Big difference.
We're not talking about you slipped on the ice and your legs sideways and you need to get it fixed. That's totally different. We know that's a biological experience. But chronic pain, the way that it changes the nervous system, the way that it changes neurons firing, that we like to call psychological, but it's also biological. You know, it's hard to separate psychological from purely biological because they affect each other. And I use the example simply of when you feel anxious or anxiety, your heart rate increases. Your heart rate increasing is a biological response to an emotion or a feeling.
Absolutely.
So there is something physically happening even though it's an emotion. So if that can happen on a small scale, how else can it be happening in your life? And this is the piece that people really start to think about, because if you can break away from that idea that your pain is purely biological, you will free yourself to actually get better. It is a hard step to take because it also means you have to start to take ownership in what the other 2 pieces look like. And this is really challenging, and I know because I've been through it, and it's not fun stuff always. But for me, one of the biggest things that helped my foot pain was better stress coping tools.
Oh man, you are hitting like that. I had a rough morning and I was just like, because I have really bad brain fog and like I don't feel great in the morning. I have a chronic illness. And I was having to do like all my mental exercises this morning. I was like, let's get in the right frame of mind. Let's do all these things. And of course I do like, you know, yoga and stuff to get my lymphatic system moving. But I was like, this is a mental thing. I have to just do this and get my head in the right space. And then I feel great. And now we're here and I'm so excited to be here. So yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I'm with you.
Yeah. And so another really interesting thing is that, so you have your vagus nerve is one of the nerves in your body. And it is actually, not only is it your rest and digest nerve, but it's also an anti-inflammatory nerve, which means when it gets stimulated, it encourages anti-inflammatory measures in your body. So my approach is really, let's find some really simple ways to get you feeling even 1 or 2% better. Because 1 or 2%, if you're in chronic pain or you have an illness all the time, every day, I know how exhausting that is. And even that 1% or 2% of relief will give you the stamina to keep going further.
Absolutely.
And it's about those small wins, right? So that's where, for example, one of the things we always start with is sleep and sleep hygiene. Because sleep, let's be honest, again, if you have chronic pain, if you have chronic illness, sleep can usually be affected. And it's usually one of the first things to be affected without us even realizing, until it's gotten so bad that we're like, yeah, I got 4 hours of sleep last night and I feel like garbage.
And then it makes your chronic pain even worse.
100%. So again, if we can do something with sleep, which is usually actually not as hard as it sounds, there's really a few different things that you can do. One I always encourage people is magnesium at night.
I just started taking that and it has been a game changer.
Yes, yes. So what's really neat is that magnesium, number one, is a natural supplement, so you don't have to be worried about taking all these other pills. That being said, obviously, if you're on a bunch of other medications, whenever you're adding supplements, just make sure
Yeah.
that, you've talked to somebody about
Do your
it.
research, talk to your
But
doctor, all that stuff.
yeah, yeah,
We're not
yeah.
giving out medical advice right here. We're just
No,
talking.
no, no
We're
medical
just talking.
advice. But magnesium is helpful because most people are deficient, and it's hard to actually truly measure if you're deficient, at least in a standardized test, because magnesium is not just stored in your bloodstream; it's stored in your cells and tissues as
Oh, I
well.
didn't know that.
Yeah, so that's some of the reasons why it's harder to recognize from just a blood test if you would be deficient. But most people are deficient. If you have high amounts of magnesium, there's a lot of neurological symptoms you'll experience. But to be honest, before you get there, magnesium is a natural laxative. So I usually
Granted.
tell people, yes, if you are starting to have loose stool and you just started taking magnesium, it might be an indication that you're taking a little bit too much.
Good to know.
And that's far before we get to any of the neurological symptoms. So that's one easy way to kind of check in with yourself to know how your body's doing with the magnesium you're starting to take. But it does so much for the body, and taking it at night helps to relax the nervous system, and relaxing the nervous system will allow you to fall asleep easier and ideally stay asleep. Again, that doesn't always happen. There's more we can do for that, but that's one of the small things you can do to start getting yourself on the road to recovery. Magnesium is also amazing for circulation and muscle tissue and getting some of that muscle cramping and tightness and everything else released, because it actually has anti-inflammatory properties as well.
Man, I love anti-inflammatories. I feel like your average, just like your average Joe who is healthy, who doesn't always think about like supplements and like having to really watch their diet or anything. Like, man, they don't get it. But like I'm all about those anti-inflammatories. Like whether I'm getting it through like my diet, through supplements, through, activities that can have certain physiological responses in my body that promotes anti-inflammation. Like it's a game
Mm-hmm.
changer for like my
Mm-hmm.
mind, my body, my spiritual essence, however, whatever. Like it's chef's kiss.
It is. Another big one that I like to educate people on is omega 3s. Because what I
Mm-hmm.
found out through educating myself is that you have omega 3 and omega 6s. They're one of the few supplements that your body doesn't create. You have to have them in your diet in order to get them into your body, but your body requires them. They both it gets a bit sciencey here, but stay with me. So they both on a cellular level, um, they fight for the same receptor. So whatever you have more of will obviously get to the receptor.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever you have less of won't get used by the receptor. What the important part is, omega 6s widely are pro-inflammatory. Omega 3s are anti-inflammatory. Ideally in your diet, you'd have a 3-to-1 ratio, meaning you'd have 3 times the omega 6s as omega 1s. But the average North American diet has 20-to-1.
Woof. Ugh. Because isn't
So, and then
like
we're
a lot of
like
fried food and stuff has omega 6,
100%.
and yes, yeah, that
Yeah.
don't make me feel good. I don't like that.
Yeah. Vegetable oil, like, unfortunately, the things that are easiest to buy in bulk
Have a lot of omega
are
6s.
usually, yeah. Yeah. So it is challenging because I had to change how I was eating as well for my systemic inflammation to help ward off, flare ups and symptoms and things like that. But that requires a little bit of a financial investment. And at first, I felt a little bit salty about it.
Yeah, because you're like, why do I have to do this? I should just be healthy and I should be able to just get this nutrition without a problem. So yeah, I get it.
Yeah. Yeah. But at the same time, I realized food is medicine.
Mm-hmm.
And if I don't want to take, pharmaceutical medicine, I need to be medicating myself with a good environment, good food, good breathing, good, like, all the other good stuff that I know is medicine for my body.
Absolutely. It's so funny thinking back to like when I first started having like chronic illness issues, and like the discovery of like, oh, if I eat these, if I eat certain things, I don't have as much chronic pain. I sleep better. My brain fog is not as bad. I have some other like really weird. I'm hyper photosensitive. Like it's real rough. I'm a little vampire girl, and I'm not the cool kind. I'm not very fast. I mostly eat vegetables. Like I'm the lamest vampire ever. But like a lot of my symptoms are very much lessened by nutrition, by meditation, by exercise, and by very, very, very high quality nutrition supplements. Like I can't get the cheap stuff because it's cheap for a reason. So, and
Mhm.
it's shocking how life changing it is once you start making those changes and the huge difference that it makes.
And these are things that, because the reality is a piece of getting better is also the movement piece, the exercise piece.
Absolutely.
But you need to make it accessible. And one of the ways you can make it accessible is by starting with all these other things that you just have to take it in the morning with your food, like it doesn't really make you go out of the way too badly to incorporate a few supplements that are going to make you feel better. But then you'll feel better, which means you'll be more able to actually take on some of those physical aspects.
Absolutely.
And I mean, again, even with that, I often tell people it's not about exercising. It's about your nervous system and cardiovascular health and moving your muscles to help with your cardiovascular and your lymphatic drainage and everything else. Because what people forget is that when you move your muscle, it contracts and releases, right? That's what any small movement, like literally putting your arm up in the air and raising it above your head, and that in itself, you're using your muscles, contracting, it's releasing. When you do that, you're actually helping circulation move through the body. So it's less stress on your heart. So the problem is most of us, like a lot of us have desk jobs where we're sitting for so long.
This is where
and
I work
our
all
heart
day
has to
long.
work harder.
I
know. I feel bad telling you this as you're sitting here listening.
Well, but
it's okay. We'll just all get up and start moving.
Well, that's what I have to do. Like at least every 45 minutes, I have to get up and do stretches. Sometimes I just have to like jump around because like if I sit for too long, I start to get achy, and I swear my brain slows down. So
it does.
I gotta get up and do some movement. So I feel you.
Yeah. But again, like people assume we're talking about getting into the gym. No, like sometimes I tell people if you want to move more, then maybe leave something in your car that you use a few times a day. Like maybe it's a chapstick. And so every time you need to get your chapstick, you have to stand up from your desk, walk to the car, get your chapstick, walk back in the building or your house or wherever. And that's something that's not completely outlandish for you to be able to do, right? That's attainable. But you don't realize that little thing and doing that a couple times a day, that's helping your body so much. And I find when I can explain it in really simple terms like this, then we can build on it. Then we can get you to a place where you can actually start doing, maybe you used to be a swimmer and you want to get back to swimming or, playing tennis or whatever it could look like. We can get you there, but we have to start with something that's attainable.
I love that. Oh, I love that so much because I've talked to a lot of individuals with various chronic illnesses, disabilities, diseases, or just injuries. And there are definitely individuals like their movement is impeded, like they are disabled, or they've had injuries or just chronic things that like they cannot do as much physical activity as other people. And that's just the reality. But I also find that the individuals who are like, well, I can't do this, but I'm going to do this. I can't go jogging, but my arms are fine. So I'm going to get some weights and do some arm weights at home or something. Like the people, and again, I'm making a huge generalization. So this might not be the case for everyone. But the people who just do what you can, just do what you can when you can. And it makes such a huge world of difference is what I've experienced and what I've seen so far.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I always say something is better than nothing.
Mm-hmm.
That's my mantra because there's going to be days where, you can't do what you want to do. And you also have to be kind to yourself about that. Because the other thing that goes along with chronic pain and injuries and, all of this is we really start to resent our body.
Absolutely. Oh, man. Yes.
And when we start to resent our body, you're resenting the thing that's literally still alive and helping you move and live and breathe. And that kind of holding on to that kind of anger about your own self really affects your ability to get better, but B, it affects all your relationships. It doesn't just affect the relationship with yourself. It affects all the relationships you have with friends and family, because a feeling that is buried alive never dies.
Oh, I like that.
And it will sit in your body, and it will come out as anger towards others. It will come out as, frustration, irritability. And then let's be honest, people don't want to hang out with that because it's just sucks, like it's not enjoyable. And then you don't enjoy it because that's not who you want to be and that's not who you are. So it really feeds the cycle. And one of the things I always ask people is, do you believe you can get better? And it's a hard question. And it comes with a lot of resistance, because the next things I always hear is, yes, but. Yep. Or my favorite phrase that everybody loves to use is, I can't. And I had a really great client recently when I was asking her about her knee injury pain, something like that. I asked, are you able to kneel down? And she was like, well, no. And then she stopped herself. She's like, actually, yes, if somebody had a gun to my head, I can physically kneel down. Is it going to be sore? Is it going to be hurting? Yeah, probably. But technically, I can physically do it.
I feel like that's working towards a positive answer. It's not quite there yet, 100%. But on the way.
Yeah. What I loved about the answer was that she recognized that it may not be accessible to her right now, but that doesn't mean it's not actually accessible. She can do it. Just right now, she has a lot of pain with it. So right now, it's not possible. And I think when you can switch your verbiage to that, it opens up so many doors to healing. It's amazing, because I recognize that, yes, right now, you might not be able to run a mile. But does that mean running a mile is never going to be possible for you? No. And I think when you start to learn about all these people who've done amazing things, and there was actually a gentleman who was a hypnotherapist, and he suffered a spinal injury and that left him paralyzed. And I don't know how he did it specifically, but he used hypnotherapy to be able to walk.
My goodness.
And he had a spinal injury.
Well, I don't know. I don't feel like, because obviously if you're listening or watching, go do your research, all that stuff. But I also feel like we really don't give enough credit to the human mind, because even I think Arnold Schwarzenegger really credited visualization as a technique for getting him where he wanted to be with his goals, like his weightlifting goals, his body image goals, like visualization. And a lot of the self-talk, like I am statements, because I'm that person that does all the research on all the things. So I definitely do meditation and psychological stuff. I'm like, how can I use my brain to feel better about myself physically, mentally, emotionally? And those I am statements, even if they're hard, and sometimes they're hard to say, but just I am happy, I am calm, I am capable. That's when I go back to a lot of the time. It's just, I am capable.
Yes,
getting that into your head, even when it's hard. And my personal experience has had a huge impact on just my ability to excuse my language, my ability to just make shit happen for myself and to recover and to feel better. So the human mind, man, it's powerful.
It is.
Which you do hypnotherapy. I don't know why you said that you did that, and I was like, oh, I don't know why I never thought of trying that. Because I do all this other stuff, and I'm like, why didn't I try to do hypnotherapy at all? So can you talk a little bit about your hypnotherapy practice? Because I'm so interested.
So I love hypnotherapy. I fell into it, and it just made so much sense. And I'm very science-based. I'm becoming more of a woohoo person in a sense, but I still need the science to understand, to feel free enough to be woohoo, I guess it is. So, I think we've all experienced those stage hypnotherapists who you're like, this seems really hoaxy.
Yeah.
But real hypnotherapy is vastly different. It's actually not as exciting as far as the theory. Like, it makes sense. Like, it's really essentially you have your conscious brain and then you have your unconscious brain. So your unconscious brain is obviously doing a lot of bodily functions, and you have to do a lot of things on automation. So think about like your computer or your phone, like it has all these programs running in the background to make it able for you to open Instagram and look at pictures. So it's happening automatically. You don't need to click a button that says start the program to allow this to run so that this can run, so that this can run. It just does it. So that's what the subconscious mind really does. Your conscious mind is like you choosing Instagram, choosing to scroll, choosing to click on something. That's the conscious mind. The conscious mind is your logic as well. So your subconscious mind is often not as logical as you'd want it to be. Your subconscious mind is your emotional mind typically. But it's also the part of you that is keeping you alive.
So important. Very important.
It is very important. And we learn off of watching others and patterns. Our body, our brain, they love patterns because every pattern means you can autonomize things easier. And your brain wants to make things automatic because when it runs on an automatic loop or pattern, it requires less metabolic energy. Your brain doesn't have to burn as many calories. Which is why when you're making new changes, you can actually feel physically tired and mentally tired, even if you're not doing anything more mentally or physically. Well, sorry, I shouldn't say mentally. Physically, you're not doing anything more. Because your brain is requiring more energy to change those patterns, you could feel tired.
Wow.
And you can actually even potentially lose weight. Just going to throw that out there. But so since our body works off of this autonomy, we learn so many things that become outdated. So I realized this metaphor the other day and I love it. And if we go back to being a computer system, you know, the Windows 87 doesn't really work today. You can't upload that onto a computer and have great functionality to the things you want to do today. Yes, you're still going to be able to use a computer for the most part as a computer, but it's going to be really outdated. It's going to be slow. It's some of the stuff you're going to be like, this doesn't even make sense. Or, you know, if you want to do a graphic, you're pulling up the paint and like you're having to physically draw it and it looks terrible. And you're not getting the outcome you want because it's an outdated system. With hypnotherapy, we essentially go into the subconscious and we try and figure out where these outdated systems are, whether they look like core beliefs. So it could be, you know, you had somebody tell you for so long, if you eat that, you're going to get fat. Or you can't do that, you're a girl.
Oh gosh.
Or, you know, with pain, it becomes a safety thing. If you do that, you'll get hurt.
Yeah.
That's a pattern that's on loop for a lot of us. So when you're able to go in, find what those patterns are, then you can rewrite them and re-download this new software, this upgraded software to encourage you to find the things you want in your life. So it could be as simple as if you have a core belief that if you eat grapes, you're going to gain weight, which I know sounds ridiculous, but let's use it as an example. All we do is we use hypnotherapy. We put you into a really relaxed state. It's actually called a theta brainwave state.
Oh, okay.
It's where you're more suggestible. So your subconscious is more open to ideas. And that's where we utilize those theta brainwaves, which is actually, it's very relaxing. You feel like you're kind of, if you've ever been falling asleep and you're kind of asleep, but you can hear everything happening around you, that's what it feels like to be in hypnosis. You're there, but you're like so relaxed. You're like, I'm okay to not really open my eyes and, you know, contribute to that conversation. So we utilize that brainwave to take that idea of grapes are going to make you gain weight. And we put in a new idea that says, I enjoy healthy foods that nourish my body.
Gotcha. And
so obviously we know that statement is going to make much more of an impact long-term than grapes make me gain weight.
Okay.
And once you can kind of put that in there, that will start to change the way other things work, because sometimes our ideas are predicated on that original thought. If that original thought is flawed, then obviously further thoughts could potentially be flawed. or could just be a little rusty and not work quite as well as we want them to. Whereas when we update all of that, everything just runs smoother and it requires less effort and energy to get the results you want because you're not fighting against those subconscious beliefs.
Man, okay, that's really freaking cool. Like, well, and it just makes so much sense too, because like, I don't know, I guess I didn't really have any like an example, but it just the way you're explaining it, I'm like, absolutely. And it very much reminds me of a and I think this is kind of a new therapy technique. Or I don't know if it's technically therapy or psycho something, one of those terms.
Yep.
One of the mental health professionals that I work with is getting certified in something called ART, accelerated results therapy. I think that's what it is. But the way she explained it to me, I'm like, this is hypnosis. That's what this is. And
It is.
and
Yeah. Well, so
yeah, go
the
for it.
only difference I would say is that, like, in hypnosis, we use specific things called inductions to put you into that specific theta state.
Gotcha.
Because if you're not in a theta state, you can still do all these other things. And this is where positive affirmations and changing your language and everything is so powerful. But it's a quicker process when you can instill it while you're in a theta state, if that makes sense. So it's not to say
Absolutely.
anything else is not as effective. It's just sometimes hypnotherapy can work faster because you're inserting the information to be read and to be used versus trying to force it in there and pull out all of the other stuff,
Man,
because
I'm about to try hypnotherapy. Like that's not where I thought this day was gonna go, but I'm pretty sure I'm gonna go down a rabbit hole of research after this, and because that's just the kind of person I am. Man, that's so cool.
yeah, it's pretty amazing. And I mean, the thing is, like, they've been able to use hypnotherapy for tons of things. And what I found amazing is that it can be, and this is one of the reasons I use it with pain, they've actually used it for anesthesia,
Oh,
for surgery. So instead of giving somebody a chemical anesthesia, they put somebody into a hypnotic state and they measure their brain waves and heart rate and all of this other stuff. And it essentially works like anesthesia.
huh. Okay. I believe that has happened. I'm a little wary of
I
that.
hear you. I still think I'm going to choose anesthesia if I have
Yeah.
a surgery, but
If I have the option, but if I'm in a situation where they're like, oh, we don't have any anesthetics, I'll be like, all right, get a hypnotherapist in here. We're doing this.
yeah. I mean, I think that's the other thing that I love about it is that it's a low risk, high reward treatment. Worst case scenario, we're going to do this. We're going to tell you some positive things. We're going to try and work on some of those negative, initial beliefs you might have, some of those things where you don't believe like you're enough. Or a good example is if you have chronic low back pain, most people feel they have a belief that's been inserted there from whatever it could be. But if I turn and twist to pick something up, I'm going to injure my back. And that's a belief that has been told enough times that it's now considered a core belief. So the automatic system's like, okay, we need to always use that as the information going forward. If we turn and twist, we're going to hurt our back. But that may not be accurate, and oftentimes it's not. It's actually not accurate. The best way to get low back strengthened and stronger and feeling better is to practice in a safe way those twisting and pulling motions. So again, with hypnotherapy, if somebody is really resistant to trying it, an activity, then I'll use hypnotherapy to try and say like, okay, well, why? Why are you so resistant to this? And the subconscious usually will tell you. It literally says, well, I believe that if I do this, this is what's going to happen. And it takes you back to the time where you were told that and you started to believe it. And when you can heal that memory and that experience in time, that's where that real further healing can take you.
Man, I love what you said about it being a low risk, high reward. Cause I know there's been so many times like for me when I've had an injury or something and I'm like, oh, I really, I know I need to do these exercises. I know I need to do these stretches. It's going to hurt. And sometimes you do the exercises and you're sore and that's normal. Like, a certain amount of soreness is acceptable and kind of expected when you're recovering from something. But there's that fear and there's that mental block. And so I love that the low risk, high reward, because if you do hypnotherapy, you're like, okay, worst thing, it just doesn't work. But the worst thing with other sorts of strategies sometimes is further injury. And that's, I think, what the fear, where that comes from. You're like, I don't want to injure myself further. I don't want to feel that pain. And so with hypnotherapy, you don't really have to worry about that. So I think that's something that more people need to consider and just look into.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
learned so much today.
I'm listening to this great book right now on chronic low back pain and the medical industry and everything else around it. I'm not going to lie, it's a little bit cynical. So I don't know if I'll recommend it for people to listen to, but if you can keep an open mind while listening to it, it might be beneficial. But there's a quote in it by an orthopedic surgeon. And he talks about the fact that he has people coming into his clinic who say, they want, for example, spinal fusion. And he's like, well, have you done the physio and this and that and whatever? And they call them conservative treatments. So have you exhausted all the conservative treatments? And they'll be like, yeah, but you know what? I just couldn't stick with it. Like, I'm really busy. It's so hard to get to physio, blah, blah, blah. And then he says, so they say that they're too busy to do these conservative treatments, but then they're willing to go under the knife and all the risks associated with that to have spinal fusion, which means they'll be off work for 4 to 6 weeks. And they have time for that, but they don't have time for the conservative therapy. Like, sometimes we need to think, like, have I tried everything? And am I saying I don't have enough time? And if I'm saying I don't have enough time, am I not valuing my health? Because it takes time. Like, if you've hurt yourself, the world we live in, like, you have to heal to move forward. And if you keep doing what you keep doing, you're not going to get better. It goes back to that really simple, quote that says, trying the same thing over and over again and getting the same results is insanity.
Yep.
But yet that's exactly what we're doing as a society when it comes to chronic pain. We're taking the opioid, we're taking the surgery, we're taking whatever it could be, the injection, without question. And when it works for a bit and then it comes back, we're like, well, we just must need another one. If you keep getting the pain, you're not addressing the cause of the pain. You're just band-aiding it until it flares up again.
Yep.
So until you realize why it's happening, you're not going to get good relief.
Absolutely. This has been such a pleasure speaking to you, just because I like your expertise, your personal experience. Like, this has just been so phenomenal. And I'm sure our listeners this has been such an enriching conversation for so many people. I have one final question, and I feel like I already know the answer to this. What would you tell someone who is struggling to find chronic pain solutions, that they feel like they've exhausted everything? What would you say to someone?
Don't give up, because there is an answer. And sometimes we need to ask ourselves, what am I doing to limit myself? Do I believe I can get better? Because I think, again, when you go back to that question, do I believe I can get better? If you don't believe you can get better, you know exactly why you're struggling to find solutions, because you've already decided that any solution you're going to try isn't going to work. And the power of the placebo means that if you believe something's going to work, the efficacy goes through the roof. In fact, there is a great quote in a book called Drug Dealer MD that says that she talks about the research of antidepressants, and they do not outperform placebos in clinical trials. So, placebos are so much more powerful than you can believe. So if you can believe you can get better, you're on the road to getting better, and you will find the resources. Just keep looking and look outside the box, right? Because the medical system has created this box for us to sit in, and it hasn't been working, and it doesn't work for a lot of people because pain is so individual. You need to find what works for you. So do not give up, because the minute you give up, that's it. You're never going to get better. It's going to be really hard for you to find a solution because you're resigned to where you are. And I know that finding answers is hard, and I know that it's tiring. Just put on a smile, find a good support system, find a good group, and know that there are answers. And there's many, many, many people who have overcome chronic pain that they never thought they could overcome. So you are not the exception to that story. There are answers for you.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much, Viktoria, for coming on with us today. Where can people find you online?
So you can find me online. My social media is at VIKKAH. You can find my link tree there in my bio that has links to, I do some online courses. There's hypnotherapy booking, massage therapy booking, all of the kind of bookings. But there's lots of information there. I try and post some content that hopefully people will find interesting. I know I find it very interesting, which is why I'm posting it. If you have questions, feel free to reach out to me via email as well at viktoriarmt@gmail.com. That's Viktoria, VIKTORIARMT@gmail.com.
Awesome. That wraps up this episode of the Warrior Stories podcast. If you are interested in learning more about any of our warriors that we've had on, head on over to hakalife.com/podcast. And if you or someone you know is interested in coming on and talking about their health journey, comment down below if you're watching YouTube, or email us at warrior@hakalife.com. Thank you all so much for joining us today, and we'll see you next time.